The twin suns of Jiren Prime lit up the silver towers of the capital. In the highest spire, Princess Virella stood on her balcony, eyes cold and proud. She was trained since birth to command fleets, lead armies, and rule empires. Her people called her the Flame Heir. No one questioned her, no one dared. Today was her coronation. Across 1,000 worlds her image shimmered in the sky. Crowds chanted her name. On every screen she raised her hand and declared herself Supreme Empress of the Jiren Empire. Her voice was strong, sharp, flawless, but behind her words she felt nothing. No thrill, no joy, just cold power. General Teth knelt before her as she entered the war chamber. "My Empress, another refugee ship has crossed into our space. From the ruined Earth sector," Virella's brow lifted. "More humans? Yes, but this one, it evaded our patrols and landed on Juvrex 7. A scout team was destroyed trying to capture him." She narrowed her eyes. "A single human, and they failed?" Teth nodded grimly. "He is no ordinary man. He uses old tech, primitive weapons, but the results are unnatural." Virella was silent. Then she turned to the screen showing Juvrex 7's jungle landscape. "I will go myself." Her advisors protested. An empress did not chase fugitives. She silenced them with a glance. If this human was dangerous, she would crush him. If he was useful, she would bend him. Either way, she would show the galaxy that her rule was supreme. The dropship sliced through clouds above the green planet. Virella stood at the edge of the ramp, her armor shining black and gold, her cloak fluttering like a banner of flame. Her guard unit followed, silent and tense. No one expected trouble. They had crushed rebellions before. One man was nothing. The jungle welcomed them with heat and silence. Birds vanished at their approach. The air felt too still. Virella walked, with purpose. Her eyes scanned the trees. She felt the change in air pressure a moment too late. A trap snapped. A guard vanished in a flash of light. Another fell screaming with thorns in his neck. Chaos erupted. Shadows moved fast between the trees. The squad fired wildly. Virella stood still, calm, reading the pattern. He was using the jungle. Not fighting with force, but with understanding, with patience, and with strategy. One by one, her elite guards fell. She finally saw him. A human. Bare arms, scars, a handmade, blade in one hand. His eyes locked with hers across the clearing. They weren't filled with fear. Not even rage. Just calm defiance. She raised her plasma pistol. He vanished. The battle ended in minutes. Only 3 guards remained. Her pride burned hotter than her weapon. This was not supposed to happen. She was Empress. She was untouchable. She ordered them to track him. Not to kill, but to capture. That night, in the jungle camp, she stared at the fire. No one dared speak. The human had shown her something no general ever dared. That power wasn't only in ships, or weapons or titles. It was in the will to resist. She didn't know it yet, but something had started to change inside her. And it started with one man, alone, hunted, and human. Rain fell through the thick canopy as Virella stood in the jungle. Mud. Her boots sank deep with every step. Her once glorious armor was scratched, her cloak soaked and heavy. She had not seen hardship like this before, not even during training simulations. This was real, gritty, wild. Her guards struggled behind her, tired and bleeding. They had chased shadows all day, and each time, the human stayed one step ahead. He left no scent, no heat trail. Just traps, strange markings on trees, and the echo of his silent steps. But Virella wasn't angry anymore. She was focused, obsessed even. "How does he move like this?" one of her soldiers muttered, wiping blood from his brow. Virella didn't answer. She was watching the forest. There was a pattern. The vines, the carved rocks, the broken twigs. He wasn't just hiding. He was leading them, and she followed. By nightfall, her team stumbled into a small cave. Exhausted, they collapsed, but she remained alert. She sat by the fire, staring at the blade he had thrown at her feet earlier. Not to strike, but to warn. It was sharp, clean, handmade from alien bone and metal. A message. He could have killed her, but didn't. Why? That night she dreamed of the throne room, where thousands had bowed to her. But in the dream, no one raised their eyes. No one spoke. No one breathed. The silence felt heavier than fear. She woke with a start. The fire was out. The blade was gone. The guards were still there, alive, untouched. But her weapon had been taken from beside her. No alarm. No sound. He had been there, close enough to end her. And again, he chose not to. She clenched her fists. This wasn't just skill. This was something else. Something deeper. Respect? No, she thought. Not yet. She rose and began walking. No orders, no command, just instinct. They followed her without question. Soon they reached a river, wide and glowing faintly from the moonlight above. And there, across the water, he stood again. The same calm eyes, the same unshaken posture. You have crossed into Imperial space, Varela said, her voice loud but steady. You attacked royal guards. You stand before the Empress of Ziran. He didn't answer. You will kneel. Still silence. Then he spoke, his voice soft, rough from years of smoke and battle. You rule stars with metal and fire, but you fear the dark. She blinked. You control armies, he continued, but you've never been alone. He turned and disappeared into the trees again, and she couldn't move, not from shock, but because his words hit something inside, her something that hadn't been touched in years. The next morning she didn't give orders. She walked ahead alone. Her guards waited behind. For the first time in her life, she didn't want protection, she wanted truth. Deep in the jungle she came to an old ruin, alien, ancient, overgrown with vines and crystals. She stepped inside slowly, and there he was, sitting beside a fire, unarmed, waiting. He looked up. You came alone. I had to, she said. He nodded once, then tossed her a fruit. Eat. She hesitated. It's not poisoned. She took a bite. It was bitter but real. Nothing like the rich royal meals she was used to. It tasted like something earned. He stared at her. Why do you chase me? She didn't speak for a long time. Then finally she whispered, because I've ruled everything except myself. He nodded again. For the first time, she didn't feel like an empress. She felt like a student. And he wasn't her enemy. He was her mirror. The ruin was silent except for the crackle of the fire between them. Varela sat on a stone carved with symbols older than her empire. The human watched her, not with fear or respect, but with curiosity. She had faced assassins, rebels, and warlords. All of them bowed eventually, but this man asked no permission, he offered no praise, and still she stayed. What's your name? She asked. He stared at the flames for a moment. Call me Jalen. She waited for more. He said nothing else. You destroyed my guard unit, she said slowly. You cost the Empire blood. You invaded my sky, he replied. I was surviving. His words were simple, but they struck deep. She remembered the faces of her commanders, always eager to conquer, always measuring lives in numbers. She had done the same. She was taught that control meant peace. But Jalen had never been taught anything. He had lived through ruin and made his own code, and yet he hadn't killed her. Why did you spare me? She asked. Jalen stood and walked to the edge of the ruin. He pointed to the horizon, where the jungle faded into broken cliffs. Because you're You're not ready to die yet. You still think power comes from being obeyed. She stood too, following his gaze. And you think it doesn't? He looked at her now. His eyes held stories of lost worlds, burned homes, fallen friends. Real power is what you do when no one is watching, when you have nothing left to command. She didn't argue. That night, she didn't return to her guards. She slept near the fire, close enough to hear the jungle but far enough to keep her thoughts alone. When she closed her eyes, she didn't dream of her throne. She dreamed of silence, of choices without orders. By morning, Jalen was already up, sharpening his blade. We move. She blinked. Where? He looked at her calmly. You want to understand power? You walk with me. She hesitated. For the first time in her life, she was not leading. She was following. They moved through tangled roots and glowing mushrooms. The deeper they went, the stranger the jungle became. Sounds twisted, colors shifted, and yet Jalen knew every step. Why? Did you come to this planet? She asked him. He didn't answer at first, then he spoke softly. It was my wife's home. She died during the war. Varela stopped walking. Jalen kept going. Your ships burned it, not on purpose, but fire spreads. She wanted to say it wasn't her fault, that she didn't give the order. But the words felt hollow. Later that day, they reached a cliff with a view that took her breath away. Below them stretched a valley untouched by war, flowers glowing, creatures roaming free, rivers shining like mirrors. She had never seen something so alive. This was her sanctuary, he said. I promised to protect it. She looked at him, then at the valley. And now I've brought war to it. He looked at her quietly. You brought choice. You can still turn back. But she didn't want to. That night, they sat beside another fire. Closer this time. The silence between them was no longer cold. It was full of understanding. She removed her armor piece by piece. Not for comfort, but because it no longer felt like hers. Jalen glanced at her but said nothing. For the first time, she felt the night air touch her skin without the barrier of gold and command, and she wondered, what else had she never truly felt? The days passed and Varela walked deeper into the wild than she had ever imagined. Each step took her further from her empire, her rules, and her crown. Yet she did not feel lost. She felt alive. Jalen moved like a part of the jungle. He taught her how to listen, not just with ears but with instinct. When the wind shifted, he paused. When birds went quiet, he stopped. He didn't speak unless it mattered, and that silence taught her more than lectures ever did. She learned how to drink water from vines, how to make fire from roots, how to heal small cuts with glowing leaves. It felt strange at first, bending to nature instead of conquering it. But soon she realized, this was the kind of power that didn't demand attention. It simply existed. They sat by a river one evening. Her hands were bruised from climbing, her boots soaked, and yet she laughed. It was a small laugh, but it echoed across the water. Jalen looked at her. You sound different. I feel different, she said. He smiled faintly. Then you're starting to see. But the peace didn't last. One morning, while crossing a narrow ridge, they heard it. A roar in the sky. Varela turned and saw it, an Imperial drone, scanning the land below. Her heart dropped. They're searching for me. Jalen didn't move. Then we keep moving, but it was too late. The drone had seen them. A red flash pulsed across the trees. Back in orbit, the Empire had been watching. Her disappearance was not seen as a test. It was seen as weakness. Commanders feared rumors of rebellion. The Empress had vanished, and in her place, whispers of a human warrior began spreading. General Teth ordered a retrieval. Bring her back, or burn the jungle. Back on the ground, Varela and Jalen ran. The forest came alive with danger. Explosions. In the distance. Smoke trails rising. Ships were coming. She stopped running. They're not just here for me. Jalen nodded. They'll wipe this place out to hide what you've become. That thought struck deep. Her empire, the one she was born to lead, would destroy an untouched world simply because she had changed, because she had learned. She gritted her teeth. Then I won't run. Jalen turned to her slowly. What are you saying? She picked up his old rifle, handed to her days ago, never used. Her fingers gripped it tightly now. I was born to rule 1,000 worlds, she said. But I never protected even one. He looked at her, really looked at her. Then he nodded once. They moved fast, set traps, marked paths, just like he had done to her before. Only now they worked together, her imperial training mixed with his survival skills, and something powerful grew between them. Trust. That night, they stood on a cliff again. Below them, lights from incoming ships flickered through the jungle smoke. They'll attack at dawn, Jalen said. She stared at the fire below. Then we hold them until they listen. Until they kneel? He asked with a teasing tone. She shook her head. No. Until they see what real power is. For the first time, she wasn't thinking of her throne. She was thinking of him, of the jungle, of every voice her empire had silenced. And she knew, when morning came, she wouldn't be empress anymore. She would be something else. The jungle was quiet before dawn. The air hung thick with smoke and the smell of burning roots. Varela stood with her back straight, rifle in hand, her royal cloak torn and stained with mud. Her crown was long gone. What remained was her will. Jalen moved beside her, planting the last trap near the ridge. He had been silent since nightfall, but she could feel his mind working, calculating, preparing. This wasn't just his home. It was all he had left. Far above, the black shapes of Imperial dropships appeared against the fading stars. They moved, slowly, confident. They believed this mission would be easy. Do you still have time to run? Jalen asked without turning. Varela shook her head. Not anymore. He gave her a look, soft, almost proud. Then the first ship dropped lower. Metal doors opened. Troopers in black armor began their descent, sliding down cables, rifles pointed at the trees. The jungle didn't wait. Explosions tore through the underbrush, throwing fire and dirt into the air. Snares snapped tight, pulling soldiers into the canopy. Every step forward brought pain, confusion, noise. They hadn't expected traps. They hadn't expected resistance. And they definitely hadn't expected her. Varela emerged from the shadows, aiming with calm precision. She didn't fire to kill. She fired to warn, to lead, to shake the blind loyalty of her soldiers. This place is under my protection, she shouted through the smoke. Drop your weapons, stand down. They paused, just for a moment. Then more ships landed. From one stepped General Teth, tall and cold as always. His armor gleamed. His face was stone. Empress, he said without emotion, you are not authorized to speak. You are to return at once. She stepped forward. I'm not your empress anymore. You don't get to choose that, he snapped. I just did. Teth raised his hand, and the soldiers raised their rifles. Jalen appeared beside her, blade in hand. He didn't say a word. His presence was enough. Teth narrowed his eyes. You've chosen a human over your people? No, she said clearly. I've chosen to protect what your empire destroys. Teth gave a signal. The sky roared. Gunship circled above, charging plasma cannons. Its lights burned through the smoke. The soldiers closed in. Varela didn't move. She stood in front of Jalen. Then something unexpected happened. One of the soldiers, her former royal guard, lowered his weapon, another followed, and then a third. They had seen her fight beside a human. They had watched her bleed, lead, and stand and fire for something greater than pride. In that moment, they didn't see a traitor. They saw a leader. Teth screamed orders, but no one moved. The silence was louder than his voice. He reached for his weapon, but Varela was faster. She fired once, striking the gun from his hand. I won't, kill you," she said. "But you will leave." Teth stared at her, seething. Then he turned and walked back to the ship. Alone. The gunship hovered a moment longer, then slowly pulled away. When the jungle was quiet again, Varela let out a long breath. Jalen stepped beside her. "You didn't have to protect me," she looked at him. "I wasn't protecting you." He raised an eyebrow. "I was protecting us," she said. And then for the first time she smiled, not like a ruler, but like someone finally free. The jungle was still, but not calm. The silence after battle was always the hardest. The ground was scarred with burns. Broken armor lay scattered like shed skin. Varela stood among it all, no longer the empress, no longer a symbol, just a woman who had chosen to change. Some of the soldiers stayed behind, not because they were ordered, but because they saw something in her they had never seen before. Honor without pride. Power without cruelty. Jalen kept his distance that night. He sat near a new fire, sharpening his blade out of habit. His hands moved with skill, but his mind was far away. Varela approached slowly. "You haven't said much since they left." He didn't look at her. "You made a choice that can't be undone." "I know. The Empire won't forget this." "I don't want them to," she said. "Let them remember. Let them know I stood for something." He stopped sharpening and finally looked at her. "So what happens now? You can't go back? And they'll come again with more ships, more fire." She sat beside him. "Then we make them listen. Not with weapons. With truth." Jalen let out a short breath, almost a laugh. "And who do you think will believe you?" She looked at the stars above. "The ones who are tired of being afraid." The next few days were filled with rebuilding, not structures, but trust. Varela spoke with the guards who stayed. She didn't give orders. She asked questions. She listened. For the first time, they spoke freely. About fear, about duty, about doubt, and about the cracks forming in the empire they once worshipped. Jalen trained the others in survival. How to move through the jungle like shadows. How to fight without noise. How to think like the hunted, not the hunter. Together they created something new, not a rebellion, not a kingdom, something smaller, but stronger. One evening, as the sun bled across the treetops, Jalen walked with Varela along a narrow trail. The leaves glowed gold in the light. Birds sang without fear. "You don't walk like a ruler anymore," he said. She smiled. "I don't feel like one." He paused. "Then what do you feel like?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, softly, like someone who was blind for too long. Jalen nodded. They reached a small waterfall hidden between rocks. The water was clear, untouched. She stepped closer and looked at her reflection. The woman staring back had dirt on her cheeks, a cut on her lip, her hair loose and wild. But her eyes looked free. She turned to him. "You lost everything, didn't you?" "Yes. And still, you chose to live, to fight, to hope." He looked down. "Because there was no one left to do it for me. Then let me be that someone," she said. His eyes met hers. No titles, no lies, just truth. She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. But just as peace began to settle, a sharp buzz cut through the air. A message beacon, small, fast, imperial. Varela caught it before it hit the ground. She opened the signal. Hologram flickered to life. An old advisor from the capital. His voice was rushed, panicked. "They've issued a bounty on your head," he said. "All loyal forces have been ordered to find and execute you." She stared at the message. The jungle was no longer just a sanctuary, it was a battlefield, and now the real war would begin. The bounty changed everything. Where there had been quiet days of healing and learning, now there was preparation. Where once Varela had walked freely, she now moved with caution. The jungle still welcomed her, but the shadows no longer felt safe. More soldiers would come, not to capture, but to kill. Jalen stood by the river sharpening blades made from crystal bone. His movements were quiet but tight. Varela could see the change in him too. He wasn't just a guide now. He was a protector. And deep down, she knew. He feared for her more than himself. "They'll send assassins," he said, not looking up. "I know," she replied. "They won't come with ships, not this time. They'll come quiet, fast, trained to hunt." She nodded. "I trained them myself." Jalen looked at her now. "Then you know how dangerous this is." She walked closer, kneeling beside him. "That's why I'm staying. I won't run. I won't hide." He paused, watching her. "This fight, it's not just about the jungle anymore, is it?" "No," she said softly. "It's about proving I was never the empress they wanted me to be." That night, the jungle lit with movement. Allies came, not soldiers, but refugees, traders, outcasts from across nearby systems, people who had once feared her empire. Now they came to her, not in chains, but with hands open. They had heard the stories. The empress who vanished. The human who taught her truth. The flame that no longer burned to destroy, but to guide. One by one they stood beside her. Among them was a former Xiran general, old, scarred, with one eye. "You ruined everything," he said. Varela looked at him without blinking. "Then why are you here?" He smiled faintly. "Because everything needed to be ruined." In the days that followed, they built defenses without drawing attention. They trained in silence, using the jungle's cover. Jalen taught them stealth. Varela taught them discipline. Together they created something stronger than fear. But the Empire was not blind. A new force entered the system. Elite shadows, trained killers, silent blades with no names. The Empire's final solution to its broken crown. Jalen felt them before anyone saw them. He stood on a high ridge, eyes closed. The air was wrong. The birds were silent again. The ground, still. His hand went to his blade without thinking. "They're here," he said. Varela ordered the camp lights out. Everyone moved into position. There was no panic, only readiness. The fear that had ruled them was gone. What remained was choice. That night the jungle bled again. Silent figures slipped through the trees. Dark armor, cold eyes, but they did not expect what waited. Traps built into the roots snapped tight. Arrows flew from the leaves. Fighters emerged from shadow, not with uniform, but with purpose. Varela fought with fire in her eyes. Her blade moved with skill, but her voice moved faster. "Do not obey cruelty, obey truth." Jalen fought beside her, silent, precise. Each movement was not about survival. It was about protection for her. One assassin reached the center camp, fast, deadly. He struck toward Varela's back, but Jalen stepped in the way. The blade pierced his side. Varela turned just in time to catch him as he fell. "No," she whispered, holding him tightly. His blood stained her hands. "I'm not," he breathed, "done yet." He smiled weakly, then passed out. The jungle roared as the last of the assassins fell. But Varela didn't hear the cheers. She only felt the weight of the man in her arms, the man who had shown her what real power looked like. And now, in the final hour, she would use that power not for herself, but for him. The camp was quiet again, but it wasn't peaceful. Varela knelt beside Jalen's unconscious body, his head resting on her lap, his blood still warm on her hands. The medics had done all they could. He was alive, but only barely. She looked around the jungle clearing. Survivors stood with bruises and burns, yet they did not run. They waited for her, not as their empress, but as their voice. The old general approached slowly. "We stopped them, for now." Varela rose, wiping the blood from her hands with a torn piece of her old royal cloak. "They'll come again in bigger numbers, and next time they won't send assassins. Then we'll be ready." "No," she said quietly. We won't fight them here. The general frowned. Then where? Varela turned to the sky. At the heart of their power. I started this with silence. I'll end it with truth. Plan formed. One she knew would put her life at risk, but her life wasn't hers anymore. It belonged to the message. She left that night, alone, wearing no armor, no crown. Only the clothes of the jungle and the fire of her voice. She entered orbit with an old smuggler's ship and landed straight in the capital of the Xiran Empire, unauthorized, unarmed, unannounced. They tried to arrest her, but the people gathered. Too fast. Crowds formed. Drones hovered. The city stood still. And then she spoke. Not from a throne, but from the ground. She told them everything, of what the Empire had done, of the planet they tried to erase, of the man who gave her back her soul. She spoke of power, and how it meant nothing without choice. They made me your ruler, she said, but I was never your voice. I was their echo. The broadcast reached every corner of the Empire. Soldiers paused mid-march. Workers stopped in mines. Captains froze on bridges of warships. Everyone listened, and something shifted. Not a war. Wave. In the following days, commanders refused orders. Cities raised new flags. Ships turned away from conquest. Some called it betrayal, but most called it awakening. And at the center of it, not a crown, but a name. Varela. She returned to the jungle days later, the Empire now cracked open behind her. When she entered the clearing, the people rose to greet her. But she walked past them, straight to the hut where Jalen lay resting. His eyes opened when she entered. He looked tired, pale, but alive. She sat beside him and smiled. You started a war, he whispered. I ended one. He blinked slowly. Did we win? She leaned closer. No. We changed the rules. He smiled faintly. Good. Outside, laughter returned to the camp. Children ran through the trees. The jungle healed itself quickly. And now, so would they. Varela stayed, not as ruler, not as symbol, but as guardian, beside the man who showed her how to lead by walking beside others, not ahead of them. And though she had been born to rule 1,000 worlds, she now only wanted one, the one she had almost helped destroy, the one she now called home.